Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webcast today, which is about Microsoft RDS 2016 and Parallels Remote Application Server. Throughout this webcast, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to add them into our chat window and we'll be addressing by the end of this presentation. When we speak about Parallels itself, before we get into RDS and other topics, I think it's very good to give you a quick introduction of what we do. Originally, we have started in the Parallels desktop for Mac business, where we allow customers to run Windows on Macs. And as well, now we do two areas on the infrastructure or business application side, which is Parallels Remote Application Server, which is the big topic today, and as well Parallels Mac Management for Microsoft SCCM, managing Macs and connecting them to the SCCM infrastructure. We have more than 5 million customers today in different industries, from government, education, healthcare, manufacturing, and as well technology companies. When we speak about Parallels Remote Application Server, just in a nutshell, the use case is provide any Windows applications, desktops, or even PCs using Microsoft RDS technology and, of course, RDSH on top of existing Microsoft servers and running on major hypervisors, which I'll get into details in a little bit. We also allow Windows applications to be running on iOS and Android, and as well make sure it is delivered in low CPU or low GPU processing computers like Chromebooks and Raspberry Pis. And it's coming a very big thing about RDS in general is how do I do better policies and controls for that? And this is where we combine Microsoft technology and Parallels technology to make sure that it's done in a much broader and detailed way. And all of the processing, it's done on the server or in the infrastructure side. And when we speak about the backend infrastructure, we want to make sure you can run on-premise, you can be running on MSPs or CSPs, or in other cases as well, if you want to leverage Azure and AWS infrastructures to make sure you have a cloud presence as well. So in a nutshell, if you want to remember what is Remote Application Server is, I can run all of my applications into any device and everything is running on the backend server. From a technology stack perspective, this particular slide summarizes what I just mentioned a minute ago, where you have your backend infrastructure, and here you can use, cloud providers, hypervisors that you might have in your infrastructure. And all of our software, except for one component, which is the load balancer, runs on top of Microsoft Desktop Services and Windows Server infrastructure. So Remote Application Server runs on the latest and greatest Microsoft technology, which is Windows Server 2016 and the new RDS features, all the way back to Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1, which means you can have one controller that is overseeing all of your infrastructure. We do actually robust printing and scanning capabilities on top of the RDS framework, where you can create policies and set how printing would work and be redirected. So the user doesn't have to remember on existing RDS implementations if my printing is on or off, or redirection is on or off. We make sure it's redirected every time a user logs in, including a feature that RDS does not provide today, which is HTML5 experience. And in the later in this presentation, I can show you a couple of examples. Thin clients and enhanced kiosk mode, we can transform end user desktops into a complete lockdown environment like a Windows 7 or Windows 8 or even Windows XP machines, and all of the applications will be streamed to the end user. On the mobility side, we provide dedicated clients for mobile devices. So if you have iOS and Android devices, and a very key feature that we do on top of the RDS framework is we do printing capabilities and as well a combination between compression using remote FX technology and as well our compression and detection to make sure performance is adequate. From a user consumption perspective, we have one-touch deployment that you can start new implementations or proof of concepts directly from Azure. So if you have the initiative to run a proof of concept, you can start 30 days for free using Azure infrastructure with RDS and remote application server running together. The migration and conversion is fairly simple. We sit on top of your existing RDS infrastructure, and we provide better and enhanced file access and search capability. And on top of your RDS infrastructure is a simple management layer. So this slide here, I know it's a lot of information, but it summarizes very well what we do. Now, when we talk about simplicity and cost, we have comprehensive security, which is policy control. We have access to files, access to servers, detecting where the user is coming. If you have a concept of different entry points, which applications user can see working in the office or even working from home. So this is a very key feature on top of RDS deployments, because RDS will be publishing everything or not. It doesn't detect where you're coming from. The second big point is the scalability. And here on the scalability side, we can add different gateways. We can have our own load balancers and as well new terminal servers. Keep in mind, the way we license our product is per concurrent user, and all of the modules and how many servers we use, it's not counted. So you can scale and distribute the load the best way you want without compromising, cost and utilization of resources. On the user experience side, you can truly choose any device, and you can use either a web front end, you can use a client front end, or you can use a combination of both, depending on how your users can access the applications. So a good example when I talk about user experience is when you have someone traveling, does not have his or her computer, and actually they would like to access an email securely or securing applications securely. They just have to go for a website, authenticate it against your Active Directory, and then have their application streamed within the browser. And I'll show that example in a couple of minutes. And in terms of cloud readiness, we support AWS and Azure. We are certified on both platforms. You can choose and run, and we already have customers running on these particular platforms. So when we speak about the user experience, this is another very good point. Why iOS or Android applications adoption is was very difficult? Because Windows apps, they would never had native touch gestures for mobile devices. So it was very clunky, very hard to use, and not effective from a usability perspective. And actually, if you go to YouTube and you look for Parallels Remote Application Server, we have a few demos showing how that client works. And I invite you to go to the App Store and download it and see actually how they work. So we have native touch capabilities. We provide our own keyboard and as well actually real-time interaction between the end user and the app, almost like if you had a real mouse in front of you, but using your fingers. And local peripheral ready to use means printing. You can use Android and iOS printing natively throughout the client. And this is a key differentiator we have when we use RDS, because the RDS client or the RDP client, it's very limited how it interacts with the local device. On the on-premise side or hybrid mode, depends how you want to deploy. We support existing deployments that you might be running on your data center. We can use a hybrid approach where you have certain components running on your data center, some on the cloud, or you can go straight to a full cloud deployment if you think that approach is more cost effective for you. And in fact, if you have questions how that would cost from a Microsoft Azure deployment, for example, we can share with you some information. What is the projected cost per user per month in a year, for example, using cloud services, RAS, and Microsoft components together. On the scalability side, what we do, which is fairly fast compared to RDS and as well other technologies, is we have instant deployment and pre-built VDI templates. If you have that use case, we interact with Hyper-V, we interact with ESX and XenServer. As well, we can add new server components like new gateways, which is the traffic controller to allow end users to connect to the application or applications. And as well, you can add new terminal servers to your farm. From a controlling perspective, we have something that we call the publishing agent, which in the end is a controller that it can be added more instances if you require for load balancing or even for a high availability requirements that you might have. So on the security side, we spoke a little bit about this part, but the biggest point is very important here. The entire communication between end user and the backend server is encrypted end to end. So you can use your own certificates. You can buy certificates to tunnel the communication. But if you want to increase the security, we can integrate with two-factor authentication technologies like RAS, DeepNet, and SafeNet, and then use OTP, one-time password capabilities to make sure users' credentials are not stolen. Comparing us to what you have in the marketplace and even to RDS itself, we are much easier to deploy, maintain, and manage. So this particular point from an administration point of view is you don't need dedicated people to manage your remote application server infrastructure, and using the single console with different wizards makes the process much simpler to be managed. We have simplicity on the design, so it's one place, one console, and one area to manage. So you can use PowerShell integration too if you want, but most of the work is always done from the console point of view. On the cost side and effective ROI, we can justify better results and performance than using a regular RDS deployment, and I'll show you why in a little bit. And as well, if you use other technologies on top of RDS, like Citrix, for example, we can cut your cost by 60%. And we support all existing Microsoft RDS versions. So all the way from Windows 2016 RDS, all the way back to the old, in quotes, terminal server technology used in Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1, which probably legacy applications would be running there. When we released version 15.5 of Remote Application Server, that was last October. In fact, we're coming with a major update in a week or so. We have made significant improvements and leveraging Microsoft RemoteFX technologies on Macs and iOS, which is fairly new and advanced in that sense. So now on the Mac side, for example, when you're using our client, we can use RemoteFX advanced graphics capabilities and as well acceleration. And I'll go into the HTML5 portal as well, which we have also better performance leveraging RemoteFX capabilities. On the improvement for large environments, the way that you can do smart workload distribution, we have our own algorithm to either maximize the number of connections per server and as well distribute the load so users will see equal performance regardless where they're connecting. So for them, pretty much is a black box concept, but we control the access and performance for each server, and then we associate to them. And as well on the Windows Server 2016 side, we also actually, I don't mention in this particular slide, but if you're using Windows Server Data Center Edition, we are also compatible to that version as well. So from a client perspective, again, this shows a little bit more what we used to do in our old UI for iOS and Android devices, and this is our new UI where we have a much easier access to the applications and functionality for them. So the biggest thing actually in this particular screen is the magnify and click and drag, which you can see a couple of videos in our YouTube, or if you want to have a dedicated demo, we can show that to you. And as well, the idea to create a desktop experience in the iOS device or Android, where you have the app launcher where you can see your applications listed, and you can toggle from one to another in a very, very easy way. On the HTML5 client, this is very interesting because it's a complete client-less experience that we depend and use the browser experience. So using the HTML5 client now implemented a policy that you can, as an administrator, set if you want to use client, a combination, or HTML5 client for the browser. We added a download page, so you can download the client, or the end user can download the client. And what is very important here is now you can have persistent favorites in multiple devices, and the entire traffic, if you try HTTP, is redirected to HTTPS, and we make sure we are doing SSL offload in our own load balancer. So if you have multiple gateways, one fails for XYZ reasons, no problem. The user traffic is automatically diverted to a different one. And when you use the HTML5 portal, which is part of the client, we do the configuration automatically, and as well, you can transition from one device to another, like a follow me, applications, and keep using the same experience. Doesn't matter the client that you're on. But the portal makes it a bit simpler because it's one URL, the users can play from there. On the building and printing, this is another feature that we enhance what RDS cannot provide today. So we can create different policies on top of the protocol. And here on the redirection side, we have universal printing and scanning, where you can choose what is the best for your use case. Compression using best speed, best size, or on connection speed. So we sense your speed, the connection that your end user has, and then we make sure its printing is fast enough. So we're not talking about taking minutes to print anything, but we're talking about making printing to happen within seconds. And of course, here on the right side, it shows how the printer will be mapped. We can say name, we can use client name, printer name, or even networking printing as well. And with Azure and Windows 2016 server, what we are doing together with Microsoft is more on the standardized process and configuration, so you can use templates. We are using a service-focused DevOps framework, so when you deploy our virtual machine from Azure, for example, it comes with RDS pre-configured in trial mode, of course, and then later you can use your own RDCals for that matter. And when we speak about remote desktop services and what actually it was improved in version 2016, and we automatically use in our Windows client and to some degree to HTML5, we're now supporting remote FX GAS capabilities, larger amount of dedicated memory per VM. So now, before it was limited to 1 gig, now you can have 250, it's now 1 gig, it used to be 256 megabytes per session. We also are allowing our personal session desktops, to reduce VDI costs and licensing. So that part of the protocol has been used. And the pen remoting support, instead of pen acting like a mouse, it's something that we have been doing already in our iOS client. And remote credential guard, and also warm start for applications and IDs that we can preserve sessions open, and you specify the time frame users can use it. So if you want to keep them alive for 2 hours, 6 hours, or even a day, and when the user goes back to the portal, we reconnect to their session. And that parameter, RDS does not allow you to manage very well, except if you use GPOs. We have that in our console and management console to do that. In the protocol level, we are now doing clear codec. We're leveraging remote FX progressive. Yes, now we support video streaming. So if you have Skype for business use cases, it's a very good one we can work. And here actually we show a couple of things about 264 as a stream, single frame with different compressions and parameters, how that would work. And support for remote FX adaptive acceleration mode throughout all of our clients except for HTML5 right now. But we're working to add this capability to HTML5 in the upcoming summer release. So if you decide to do a public cloud, this is one example. Here, when you have desktop as a service or even application publishing on Azure infrastructure, this could be on your data center as well. The only difference here, you could add VDI and as well remote PC. And what you can do in the hybrid mode, of course, you can do a site-to-site VPN to leverage what you already have and extend it to the cloud. What is very cool here is, depending how you define your rules for load balancing or rerouting, if you will, you can have full access for your infrastructure, load balance through the cloud, or depending how it's detected, you can go to the cloud or even vice versa, just access from the cloud and then redirect internally. That's not so much related to the RDS part, but it's very important you to know that we have all of these capabilities from a deployment perspective. So why you choose us? First, it's a simplified, all-inclusive technology. So if you have your own business, you can use our subscription. But if you're a service provider, you can use our service provider license keys. If you use other technologies today, like Citrix and VMware, we can reduce your cost up to 60%. And we're flexible depending on the infrastructure you have, like I just mentioned, what you want to do. And we can actually leverage existing Azure Office 365 credentials that you might have, or even SQL from a reporting point of view. On the functional side, it's out of the box. You can run a proof of concept or have it going in less than 10 or 15 minutes on Azure. If you decide to do on your data center before making a final decision, that's totally fine and great, because you can deploy in your infrastructure, and we can help you out to do the setup, and that we can do in less than 2 hours. And you can choose the best approach for your end users. So I have actually a demo to show you and give you a little bit of more details how that works, and then we can go to the Q&A. So let me just switch here the screens for 1 second. So this is the end user interface that we called the HTML5 client. And from the client, what we can do once you log in against your Active Directory, we automatically detect if you have a client. If you don't, no problem. You can always download it from our page or go to parallels.com from the matter. On the application side, here are a few things. You can have on your user profile, Active Directory group, if you will, different application groups like Microsoft Office, sales tools, or even different desktop experience, like a true remote PC running Windows XP all the way to Windows 10, shared desktops, or even the apps. So to access an application within the HTML5 portal is super simple. You double click, and let's say I want to open Microsoft Word. So I can right click here and say open in Parallels HTML5 client. This is something today RDS does not have that capability. And multiple applications that you open inside the browser, they will be containing the browser. So let's say, now I want to open Microsoft Excel. I can see in this particular workspace, Excel open. So let me just maximize this for a second and just say test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and hit enter. And if I decide to print this particular output, fairly simple. You just click on print, use a Parallels printer, and when you send to the printer, this is not going to generate a PDF. It's a true printer output that will generate to the computer, and then you can choose, the printer you want to go. The second important feature here is if I don't want to use the experience on HTML5 and I want to leverage the whole experience, let me give you another example. Let me open a virtual desktop and open with the client. And here is, we launched the client, and now we're logging into the Windows Server 2016. And this is actually a Windows 2016/10 look and feel, where I can see now all of my desktop and applications, which I can open Word, Skype. Then actually, I wanted to show a little bit from the back end here on the Parallels Remote Application Console. So the way we operate is very simple. You can use the wizards. Here you can click on Start, add new terminal servers, publish applications, or even invite users. So when you add a new terminal server, what we do, so let me just say here, RAS demo 03, I'll add this particular server, and we will do the detection, and the detection says, oh, this server does not have the agent installed. So you can click Next, and then you can add automatically the firewall rules, the RDS instance, and as well automatically restart the server if it's required. Now, if you have different groups, that will be added to the group automatically for you. On the application side is also simple. You can use specific server groups or applications that you might have, or application servers. So let's say I want to use an individual server in this particular machine, and I click Next. We will be scanning all of the apps that are available there. And let's say I want to publish, Chatter Desktop from Salesforce. I'll click Next, Next, and let me apply these particular changes, and they will be saved on the server side. Okay, great. If I go back for a second to the browser and I refresh my client, here the new application has been added. From a load balancing perspective, we can do two types. They can be resource-based or round-robin, and of course, we recommend users and customers to use resource-based and limit one session per user. So if they have 5, 6, 10 apps and the server has enough resources to execute it, they will be tunneled to one single instance. And that is great because it will save you RDCals instead of consuming too many, where is the model that RDS uses as a standard feature. Publishing, here we have all of the apps and services that you publish. So we just created here Chatter Desktop, where you can check where I'm publishing from, the application characteristics, filtering, and in this case, filtering will leverage Active Directory groups. So if you want to say Chatter is only available, for domain admins, for example, we added this group. If you want to limit as well what client version or gateway, which means where they're coming from, we can add that feature as well. This is a feature that RDS does not cover very well, and I wanted to make sure you guys see that as a very big thing. Another interesting aspect on the application side is if you have limited number of licenses for an application, let's say if just Chatter for desktop, you only have licenses for 5 users, we can actually change the number here to 5. And if you exceed the number of licenses, what do you want to do? You can warn and do not start, warn and start, and actually notify users, administrators, and not start, which means you will receive an email automatically saying, look, we exceeded the number of licenses for this application. On the connection side, we also have a nice panel where you can define authentication method, second level of authentication, and you can choose the different providers that you can use, and as well for how much time you want to declare a session idle or even automatically time out and log off users. So in this particular environment, we say 1 day because I want to make sure people connecting and disconnecting throughout the day doesn't, lose any data or being automatically logged off. So that is a very good feature that we do here. On the policy side, you can create different policies for different groups, if you will. So here we have one called Devices and Network Optimization. Again, we can define what users can leverage this particular rule. And in the connection properties, you can pretty much manipulate all of the settings that are deployed on the client side. So connection, right? Do you want them to save the password locally? Yes or no? Do you want to allow them to use printing? Yes or no? Do you want to redirect specific printers? Yes or no? On the scanning side, the same approach. On the security side and local resource redirection, by default, we are going to redirect disks for you. But if you have USB devices, we can actually allow or not allow them to be mapped. And if you allow them, we also have the capability to also use devices that are plugged in later. So we discover plug and play over the session and make sure users can access them at any time. On the smart cards and serial ports, of course, this is for legacy devices, and smart cards for application authentication and so on. And the experience side, it's where we can do great protocol management, where we can use detection automatically, but as well for printing and scanning scenarios based on connection speed, like I saw the screenshot a little while ago, the same thing for scanning. Now, while you have people connected, in the administration side, we can see users that are currently connected with desktops, applications, and if a particular user needs to be logged off for any reason, or you want to send them a message or even remote control, you have all of these controls and options over here. Want to know what the user is executing? We can here click on Show Processes. We can see Excel is open and Windows Explorer as well. So you have the full control of the session of the user. And in my farm, where I have different types of accesses, which of course, typically remote desktop services, you have your terminal server agents, but what they don't do is the remote PC part. So here we have two different PCs published where we can see, for example, properties, if how they are in the network, agent settings, printing capabilities, and as well if you want to allow them to have their desktop print allowed. So this particular remote PC for James, it's only allowed for this particular users to have access to it. So again, it's very policy control based. Finally, the last important piece before we go to Q&A is the reporting part. So we have different reports that you can see how the infrastructure is working, something that RDS doesn't provide out of the box. You can go to application usage. We can see, in the last 7 days, how the applications have been accessed. If you don't like, for example, the bar graph, we can just change to pie. And here we can see that the #1 application running here is Adobe Reader. We can see, for example, user activity. So double click on the user activity over the last 7 days. We can see Dave, user Jack, and James have been the top users. How much time they have used? Looks like, they have been more disconnected and, active for quite some time. So you can have that logic put in place. And as well, how your sessions active on server, you can pick all of your servers and see how they are, and how much time they're using. The same thing for server health. If you need to understand how your servers are being used, we can say, for example, this particular gateway publishing server role as well, how it's being used. We can load a report, and here we can see CPU usage is actually fairly low, and memory is really nothing. So we can add more and more users if it's required. So let me just transition back to my desktop here, and I will stop sharing my screen, and I would like to open the session for Q&A. Please post them here in the Q&A session if you don't mind. How about printing on Apple Macs? This is one question. Yes, the same thing happens. So let me just share the screen one more time. Let me open an application here for a second. So printing redirection is available as well on Macs. So let's say I will open Microsoft Office here, and let me open Word here on the client. Let me just create a document here called test 1, 2, 3. And when I click here on print, we automatically map the printers that I have. You see here Brother for FISS by Parallels. All of those printers, they are redirected on Apple Macs. Let me just go back here to the second question. How much does increased dedicated memory affect the performance? How much does increased dedicated memory affect the performance? The dedicated memory here, it depends on how you size the server. So we have a sizing calculator that usually we allocate 4 or 5 apps per user when you put 30 users per terminal server. If you have more applications that will be publishing per server, the number of users might be changing or might be changed. So usually we need to discuss a little bit more about what applications you have and what would be the best distribution for that. So I can, ask someone from our technical group to reach out to you, and then we can discuss those scenarios. The next question we have here, why can you see the application name that are running from the admin console? Actually, you can. So let me just go back here to the admin console for 1 second. Another way to access it is also using remote application server. So let me open the client. So we go here back to administration, and here we see that my user here has a few connections. If I right-click here and I see show running processes, I can see the applications that I'm using. So the way the session management control is, it tells you what servers are in use, the user, and then the details, because you can see multiple applications that will be displayed in here. Of course, you can change the view processes showing the select servers, but I can just change it to show all of the servers, and then here we can see the server list and all of the applications, session IDs and process IDs. It was just more about a simpler way to see in the previous screen, and then you can get to the details on the next screen. Oh, sorry. Let me just share here very quickly. So here in the console, the administration side, let me just say it again. You see here the servers and the user. I'm getting my user. Here, show running processes. It lists all of the applications that I have. So we didn't want to have a very busy screen here. Imagine if you have like several hundreds of users. We sort by them server and user connections. Right-click, running processes. I can see the process. And in fact, if you need to kill the process for any reason, you can, kill it from the console as well. The other option would be see selected server, which is RAS demo 1. But if I want to see everything related for this user in all servers, we can see, all of the processes running here in the server distribution on this side as well. Any additional questions? If there are no additional questions, I would like to thank your time. And if you want to see or watch again what we showed today or go to more information, we will be sending you a summary soon. And as well, if you need more information, of course, you can always find it at parallels.com and also connect either on Twitter, Facebook, or directly to our sales group. So thank you all, and have a great day.